The movie begins in 1938 during a wedding ceremony in Spain amidst the intense civil war between the Republicans and the Francoists. Allied with Franco's forces are the Nazi Germans, who send a soldier to a remote village. The soldier disrupts the joyous wedding festivities, leading his companions to open fire on the guests, resulting in their tragic deaths. Following the wedding massacre, they release canisters of a strange green substance, narrowly avoiding death themselves. Meanwhile, a man faces a firing squad, attempting to leverage his family connections to evade execution. Saved by his uncle, a rebellious captain in the Francoist army, narrowly escapes death after a run-in with a pro-Francoist judge. His uncle escorted him to the office and delivered the news. In exchange for amnesty, the Francoists are dispatching Jan on a perilous mission. Tasked with journeying behind enemy lines and traversing a treacherous mountain range, Jan must deliver a crucial message to a general. Despite Jan's protests, his uncle reminds him that his own actions have led to this fate. Jan finds himself accompanied by a young and inexperienced private, whom he had previously assisted, now assigned as his driver for the mission. Without delay, they prepare for their journey. Just before departing the base, Jan comes across a wounded comrade on a stretcher. Showing a gesture of compassion, he lights the man's cigarette before he is attended to by the nurses for medical care. In addition, Jan notices the presence of the Nazi soldier within the base. Jan instructed the private to take a shortcut, despite the private's warning that it led through no man's land, as it was deserted. Exhausted, Jan dozed off in the vehicle while en route, only to be awakened by the private's alarmed voice. Peering out, they found themselves confronted by soldiers brandishing weapons. Approaching their vehicle, a soldier demanded to see their papers, which they lacked. Through quick thinking and deception, they managed to hoodwink the soldier, who eventually allowed them to continue on their journey. Intrigued by the private's reason for joining the war, Jan learns that he enlisted to protect his village's renowned puff pastry recipe made by nuns. Fearing its loss in a Republican victory, he joined the Francoists. While on the road, they witness a fighter plane crash, prompting Jan to halt the car to aid the pilot. Trekking through the forest, they stumble upon the dead pilot. Soon after, they're held at gunpoint by Republican forces led by Sargent. Recognizing Jan's unusual presence behind enemy lines, Sargent suspects a significant mission. Matakura searches Jan and finds the hidden message, revealing the truth behind Jan's supposed mission concocted by his uncle. Sargent decides to take Jan and the private captive to the camp. As they start their trek, the American journalist stays behind to photograph the pilot's corpse hanging from his parachute. Suddenly, the pilot comes to life, attacking and biting the journalist. The group rushes to help, shooting the pilot multiple times, but he continues to crawl toward them until finally being shot in the head, ending the threat. The group is astonished by the pilot's resurrection, unable to comprehend how he could still be alive. Meanwhile, the journalist, now deceased, also unexpectedly rises back to life, growling and screaming as he attempts to attack the group, until a Russian soldier finally ends the threat by twisting his neck. They press on until reaching the Republicans' camp, only to find it littered with corpses. Matakura kneels beside a woman she recognizes, only to be startled when the woman suddenly springs back to life, displaying the same aggressive behavior as the pilot and journalist. Gradually, other corpses in the camp also begin to rise. One of the young Republican soldiers recognizes his father among the resurrected, approaching him in hopes of reconnection, but his father fatally attacks him. Reluctant to harm their former comrades, Sargent realizes they are no longer human and must be dealt with accordingly. Following the Russian soldiers' guidance, they begin firing indiscriminately at the zombies. However, the undead prove impervious to bullets. Jan directs them to aim for the head, and Matakura's follow suit, successfully dispatching several zombies. Overwhelmed by their numbers, the group flees to the shore where a boat awaits. They hastily board the vessel and set sail down the river, narrowly escaping the pursuing zombies. At this juncture, the survivors consist of 5 of them, along with 2 additional Republican soldiers. Sargent determines their next objective: to reach a safe house he's familiar with in the mountains. There, they can contact for assistance and gather information about the ongoing situation. They agree to prioritize survival against the zombies before returning to the Civil War. The safe haven nestled deep in the mountains becomes their temporary sanctuary. In the forest, they encounter a horde of zombies. Racing through the trees, Jan saves Matakura's by taking out a zombie behind her. The Russian soldier is bitten and swarmed by zombies, forcing them to abandon him. As they approach the cabin, Sargent notices the lights are on. Upon entering, they find a nun accompanied by 2 Francois soldiers, a lieutenant and a Muslim. Jan attempts to assert his authority as a captain from their army, but his affiliation with the Republicans raises doubts. Tensions escalate as the soldiers point their guns at each other, but Jan manages to persuade them to set aside their hostility and unite against the common threat. Gathered around the table, the newcomers recount their own encounters with zombies earlier in the day. The nun tends to Sergeant's wound, while they collectively decide to stay and rest in the house for the night, agreeing to divide the ammunition and food supplies. Curious about the inexplicable events, Sergeant queries the nun about any biblical explanations. She responds, asserting that God is not involved. Rather, someone else is attempting to wield godlike power. They all take refuge in the attic to keep watch. 2 Republican soldiers, Mecha and the private, connect over their shared love for cars. The private recognizes Mecha as a famous racer from his childhood and expresses hope for him to race again after the war. However, Mecha, embittered by the ongoing conflict, vehemently declares he will never race again, convinced he won't survive the war. With the Republicans facing defeat and the Francoists advancing, tensions rise. The Muslim questions Mecha's determination to keep fighting despite the apparent inevitability of defeat. Mecha responds that he's committed to finishing what he starts, likening it to his approach to racing. As the night progresses, the group's camaraderie grows. Jan finds himself captivated by Matakuras, while Sergeant is similarly drawn to the nun. Upstairs, Mecha spots several zombies approaching the house. Alerting the group, they hastily evacuate. Mecha ignites a stick of dynamite, which detonates after their departure, eliminating the zombies inside the house. They encounter the Russian soldier, now transformed into a zombie, wandering nearby. Matakuras implores Sergeant to end the soldier's suffering, and with a heavy heart, he complies, swiftly dispatching their former comrade. Jan then reveals a map discovered amidst the flames, inscribed in German. Though he can only decipher a few words, Jan deduces that it outlines an impending attack orchestrated by the Germans. However, this assault isn't conducted by human forces. Rather, it's the result of zombies created by the Germans' biological weapon. Jan suggests they journey to the epicenter indicated on the map, where the outbreak originated. They make their way to the town, marked on the map. Glasses pulls Sergeant aside and confides in him about his scheme to steal the formula used by the Germans to create zombies, hoping the Republicans can utilize it in the war. However, Sergeant declines the proposal. As they explore, they stumble upon their abandoned equipment. Concealed inside the confession booth, they find the bride from the opening scene of the film. She recounts how the Nazi soldiers arrived at her wedding, massacring her guests. Her husband shielded her with his body from the bullets. Subsequently, the Germans released the blue chemical and took refuge inside the church. The bride sought shelter in the cellar, witnessing her deceased guests reanimate as zombies. Amidst the chaos, the Germans laughed and revealed as the zombies attacked the living. However, the infection eventually reached the church, leading the Germans to turn on each other until none remained. Suddenly, Glasses reveals that he has found the formula the Germans use to create zombies. He intends to deliver it to the communists, proposing they use it against the Germans. He urges the Republicans to accompany him, leaving the Francoists behind. However, Sergeant and Matakuras oppose his plan, citing their comradeship with Jan and the others. Disagreements arise, leading Glasses to ultimately decide to depart alone, leaving them all behind. In a sudden attack, zombies overwhelm Glasses and his allies. Seeking sanctuary, they retreat to the church. However, the bride unexpectedly transforms into a zombie and assaults the lieutenant. Despite attempts to help, the bride bites the Muslim's boot. Matakuras intervenes, ending her existence with a shot to the head. The group debates leaving the Muslim behind since he was bitten, but he shows them that her teeth didn't make it to his protected foot. Emerging from the tunnels, they return to the mountains. Sergeant notices the nun has locked herself inside the tunnel. She confesses she was bitten by the bride and chooses to stay behind to confront the zombies. Though saddened, Sergeant respects her decision and gives her his blessing to stay behind. After deciphering the map, Jan discovers the Francoists and Germans intend to distribute the blue powder across the country. Determined to prevent this, he suggests the group head to the outpost, where the trains loaded with the powder are being prepared. Sergeant agrees to the plan, but insists that if they are captured afterward, his comrades must be pardoned, with him bearing the punishment of death alone. They arrive at the outpost, and Jan walks alone to the gate, where his uncle and the Nazi soldier are waiting. He wants them to open the gates to his comrades and enemies, but the uncle only wants him inside. The Francoists do not care that people are going to die. and they plan on bombing the whole valley anyway. Jan goes back to the group, and they come up with another plan. The private confesses that he was bitten by a zombie while repairing the truck. He decides to sacrifice himself by carrying explosives to breach the outpost gates. Jan bids a tearful farewell to the private as he sets out on his mission. Tragically, the private is shot dead by other soldiers before he can reach the outpost. However, he rises again as a zombie and manages to trigger the explosives, enabling the group to enter the outpost. As the group infiltrates the outpost, they find themselves pursued by a massive horde of zombies. The lieutenant decides to face his fate alone and separates from the group. Mecha takes to a motorcycle to divert the zombies, but the Muslim intervenes to save him. Tragically, the Muslim is overwhelmed by a zombie while Mecha narrowly escapes. The lieutenant finds himself surrounded by zombies and seeks refuge in a truck, followed shortly by Mecha. With no keys inside, they realize their impending demise. Setting aside their differences, the two men find solace in each other's company in their final moments. As they reflect on their lost loved ones to the war, Mecha discovers a box of explosives in the truck bed. He ignites a stick of dynamite, and the two men share a toast to Spain. With a final act of defiance, they set off the dynamite, causing the truck to explode, wiping out the remaining zombies and sealing their own fates. Sergeant takes charge of starting the train, while Jan and Matakuras search inside the train car for an antidote. Inside, they encounter the Nazi, who admits there is no antidote. He then injects himself with his toxin and transforms into a zombie. However, Matakuras swiftly dispatches him with a shot to the head before he can pose a threat. However, there was another zombie waiting behind the curtain, and he bites Jan in. In a swift move, Matakuras shoots the zombie. Then without hesitation, she uses her knife to sever Jan's infected hand to prevent the spread of the infection. Meanwhile, Sergeant is overwhelmed by zombies. In his final moments, he expresses his hope of reuniting with the nun in the afterlife before ending his own life. Just as the bombings commence, Matakuras and Jan take refuge in a steel box as zombies swarm the train car. Before the bombs hit, they share a gentle kiss and the train continues moving. At the rear of the train, the Muslim also survives. With all the zombie chemicals contained in the train car and the infected eliminated by the bombings, they ensure the infection won't spread further. Jan encounters Matakuras once more, but they acknowledge their ideological differences and part ways. The movie concludes with Jan, now smoking a cigarette with his remaining hand, walking back to his village alone. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.